The bishop landed on the wrong square, and for a split second, Emily Rowe thought she'd just handed $50,000 to the cruelest man in Manhattan. Nathan Vale's eyes lit up like a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. The Meridian Room went silent, 60 of New York's wealthiest holding their breath as the billionaire reached for her exposed king. But Emily wasn't panicking. She was counting. 3 moves. That's all she needed to destroy him. What Nathan didn't know was that this game had started 20 years ago, when he stole everything from a man who never got to teach his daughter how to fight back. Until tonight, if you want to see how a waitress takes down a billionaire with nothing but 64 squares and the truth, stay until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Meridian Room didn't advertise. It didn't need to. Tucked behind an unmarked door on East 68th Street, 3 floors above a Swiss bank that never seemed to close, it existed in that peculiar space where old money went to pretend it was still relevant. The walls were dark mahogany, the carpet was Persian, and the silence was expensive, the kind you paid for by never asking how much anything cost. Nathan Vale owned Table 7, not officially. The club's roster listed a rotating membership of hedge fund managers and tech moguls who paid $40,000 a year for the privilege of losing quietly. But everyone knew Table 7 belonged to Nathan. Had for 3 years, ever since he'd walked in at 29 with a chess rating that made grown men nervous and a personal fortune that made them terrified. He was there every Thursday at 9, same seat, same routine. Black coffee, no sugar. Phone face down on mahogany that cost more than most people's cars. Whoever sat across from him usually lasted 20 minutes before their position collapsed, and they made some excuse about an early morning meeting. Tonight's victim was Gerald Fisk, a real estate developer who'd made the mistake of mentioning he'd played chess in college. That was 40 minutes ago. Now Gerald's forehead was doing this thing where the sweat collected just above his eyebrows, and his hand kept hovering over pieces he couldn't afford to move. "You're bleeding pawns," Nathan said, not looking up from the board. His voice had that particular quality of boredom that made everything sound like an insult. "You've been bleeding them since move 12. I'm just waiting to see how long it takes you to notice." Gerald's laugh came out strangled. "Well, it's been a few years since You opened with the King's Indian, aggressive, romantic even. Then you got scared and started playing defense." Nathan picked up his queen, let it hover over the board. "You can't play defense in chess, Gerald. Not really. You can only play less aggressive offense, and yours is pathetic." He dropped the queen. The piece clicked against wood like a bone snapping. "That's checkmate in 4 moves, 5 if you waste my time trying to find a miracle." Gerald stared at the board, his face doing this slow collapse from concentration to comprehension to humiliation. Around them, the usual Thursday crowd pretended not to watch. 16 leather armchairs, 15 occupied by men who'd each lost to Nathan at least once, all of them pretending to read newspapers or discuss market trends while secretly savoring someone else's destruction. "I don't see it," Gerald said finally. "Then you're not looking." "Nathan, I really think if I just—" "You can resign now, or I can play it out and explain exactly how badly you fucked this up. Your choice, but I'm charging you the same hourly rate either way." That was Nathan's thing. He didn't play for money. He had enough money that the concept had stopped meaning anything around his second billion. He played for humiliation, for the specific pleasure of watching someone realize they were never as smart as they thought they were. Gerald resigned. He stood up too fast, the kind of jerky movement that said everything about wanting to be literally anywhere else, and mumbled something about giving Nathan a rematch sometime. They both knew that would never happen. Gerald would probably stop coming to the Meridian Room entirely. Find some other overpriced club where he could rebuild his ego in peace. Nathan reset the board, black and white pieces sliding into their starting positions with mechanical precision. He didn't celebrate wins, didn't really acknowledge them, just moved on to the next game like a shark that couldn't stop swimming. "Brutal as always, Nathan." Thomas Blackwell, the club's manager, appeared at table 7 with a fresh coffee. He was 60, British, and had the kind of accent that made everything sound either tremendously important or completely meaningless. "Gerald's a friend of the Steinberg family," Thomas continued, setting down the cup. "They won't be pleased." "Then they shouldn't have sent him to play me." "They didn't send him. He volunteered, said he'd heard stories and wanted to see if they were true. And now he knows." Nathan lifted the coffee, found it exactly the temperature he preferred. Thomas had been doing this long enough to know. Who's next? Next? It's Thursday. It's 9:30. Someone in this room is working up the courage to sit down and get destroyed. I'm just trying to speed up the process. Thomas glanced around the room, and Nathan followed his gaze out of boredom more than curiosity. The usual suspects. Harrison Webb from Webb Capital, still pretending that scandal with the escort service never happened. Michael Chen, who'd made a fortune in pharmaceuticals and lost half of it in a divorce that made Page 6 for 3 months straight. Margaret Hale, one of the few women who bothered coming to the Meridian room, sitting alone near the window doing the Times crossword in pen because she needed everyone to know she was smart. And in the corner, half hidden behind the bar, someone Nathan had never bothered noticing before. A waitress. Young, maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had started to come loose. She was standing perfectly still, holding a tray of empty glasses, watching table 7 with an intensity that seemed wrong for someone whose job was to be invisible. Who's that? Nathan asked. Thomas followed his gaze. Emily Rowe. She's been with us about 8 months. She's staring. She watches the games sometimes, on her breaks. I think she's a fan of chess. A fan. Nathan tasted the word like it was spoiled. Tell her to come here. Nathan. Tell her I want to talk to her. Thomas hesitated, which was unusual. Thomas didn't hesitate. He was too well paid and too British for that. But something about this request made him pause. She's working, he said finally. Then she can work over here. Go. Thomas went. Nathan watched the interaction from across the room. Thomas approaching, leaning in to speak quietly. The waitress, Emily, going very still, the way rabbits do when they think a predator might not have seen them yet. Thomas gesturing toward table 7. Emily shaking her head, small, sharp movements that said no in about 15 different ways. But Thomas was persistent, and whatever he said next made Emily's shoulders drop in defeat. She set down her tray and crossed the room. Up close, she looked tired. The kind of tired that wasn't about one bad shift, but about months or years of them stacking up. Her uniform was clean but worn. The black pants had been hemmed at least twice, and her white shirt had a stain near the collar that she'd tried to hide with her apron. No makeup. No jewelry except a watch that had stopped working, the hands frozen at 3:17. Mr. Vale, she said quietly, not quite making eye contact. Thomas said you wanted to speak with me. Sit down. I'm working. I'm aware. Sit down anyway. She didn't move. Just stood there, hands clasped in front of her, and Nathan felt something unfamiliar. The faint friction of someone not immediately doing what he wanted. I could have Thomas fire you, Nathan said, conversational. Right now. One word and you're unemployed. Or you could sit down, we'll talk for 5 minutes, and then you go back to collecting glasses. Which sounds better? Emily's jaw tightened. For a second, Nathan thought she might actually tell him to fuck off, which would have been interesting. But instead, she pulled out the chair Gerald had vacated 20 minutes ago and sat down. Do you play? Nathan asked, gesturing to the board. Sometimes. Sometimes. How diplomatic. You either play or you don't. I play. How long? Since I was a kid. Rating? She hesitated. I don't have one. Never competed? No tournaments? No USCF membership? Nothing official? No. Nathan leaned back, studying her. She was still avoiding eye contact, looking at the chessboard instead, and there was something about the way she looked at it. Not casual, not curious, but hungry. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You and I are going to play a game. Right now. If you win, which you won't, I'll give you $50,000. Cash. Thomas can verify I'm good for it. Emily's eyes snapped up to meet his for the first time. They were brown, dark, and absolutely furious. And if I lose, you quit. Tonight. Walk out of the Meridian room and never come back. That's not a fair wager. I don't do fair. I do interesting. And you watching my games from the corner every Thursday for 8 months, that's interesting. So either you're fascinated by chess or you're fascinated by me, and I'm betting it's the former, which means you want to play. The room had gone quiet again. Not the polite quiet from earlier, but something sharper. Everyone was listening now, even the ones pretending not to be. Why would you offer this? Emily asked. Boredom, curiosity, take your pick. You want to humiliate me. I want to see if you're worth humiliating. There's a difference. Nathan gestured to the board. One game, standard rules. You can have white if it makes you feel better. Emily looked at the board, then at Nathan, then at Thomas, who was standing near the bar looking deeply uncomfortable with this entire situation. If I say no? She asked. Then you've spent 8 months watching chess games you're too scared to play, and I'll make sure everyone in this room knows it. It was cruel. Nathan knew it was cruel. That was the point. He'd learned a long time ago that people revealed their true selves under pressure, in boardrooms, in courtrooms, in front of 64 squares where there was nowhere to hide. Emily stood up. For a second, Nathan thought she was walking away, which would have been disappointing but not surprising. But instead, she pulled off her apron, folded it carefully, and set it on the chair beside her. $50,000 if I win, she said, in cash, tonight. Agreed. And you apologize. For what? For doing this to people. For turning chess into a weapon. For making something beautiful into something cruel. Nathan smiled, actually smiled, which he didn't do often enough for it to look natural. If you win, he said, I'll apologize to everyone in this room. I'll get down on my knees and beg forgiveness. How's that? That works? Emily sat back down, and this time there was something different in the way she moved. Less like prey, more like a fighter stepping into the ring. She turned the board so white-faced her and made her opening move. Pawn to e4. Nathan responded instantly. Pawn to c5. Sicilian defense. Aggressive, complicated, exactly the kind of opening that separated people who played chess from people who understood it. Emily didn't hesitate. Knight to f3. They traded moves quickly, efficiently, neither of them speaking. Around them, the Meridian Room had transformed into something closer to a theater. Margaret Hale had abandoned her crossword. Harrison Webb had actually stood up to get a better view. Even Michael Chen, who usually spent Thursday nights trying to drink away his alimony payments, was leaning forward with something like interest. By move 10, Nathan realized Emily wasn't just competent. She was good, really good. Her positions were clean, her development was textbook, and she wasn't making the amateur mistake of moving the same piece twice in the opening. By move 15, he realized she might be better than good. Where did you learn to play like this? He asked, sliding his bishop across the board. My father taught me. He must have been good. He was. Was. He died. She said it flat, emotionless, the way you'd mentioned the weather, but her next move came a half-second slower, and Nathan filed that away as useful information. I'm sorry, he said, not meaning it. No, you're not. You're right, I'm not. But it seemed like the thing to say. Emily captured one of his pawns. You don't have to pretend with me, Mr. Vale. I know exactly who you are. And who's that? Someone who mistakes cruelty for intelligence, someone who thinks winning makes them right. Nathan laughed, genuine surprise cutting through his usual boredom. You're mad at me. I'm not mad. I just think you're sad. Sad. You're 32 years old, you're worth billions, you have everything anyone could want, and you spend your Thursday nights destroying people at chess because it's the only thing that makes you feel anything. That's not power, that's desperation. She moved her queen and Nathan felt the first cold touch of actual concern. His position wasn't bad. Not yet, but it was under pressure in ways he hadn't anticipated. She'd built her attack so quietly, so patiently, that he'd barely noticed the trap until it was half closed. You've studied my games, he said. Every Thursday for 8 months. I know how you play. You attack early, you attack hard, and you expect people to panic, but panic is a choice. And you're not panicking. No, you should be. Nathan launched his real attack then, the kind of aggressive combination that usually made opponents realize they were out of their depth. He sacrificed a knight to open up her king side, following it with a bishop move that threatened 3 different pieces simultaneously. Emily's hand hovered over the board. For the first time, she looked uncertain. The room held its breath. She moved her rook. Not the obvious defensive move, not the panicked retreat Nathan expected, but something else. Something that actually made his position worse. That's illegal, he said immediately. It's not. You're putting yourself in check. No, I'm not. Look again. Nathan looked. She was right. The move was legal, barely, by a technicality he'd missed in his rush to attack. And now his bishop was hanging, his knight was out of position, and she'd somehow turned his aggression into a weakness. "Who the fuck are you?" he asked quietly. Emily met his eyes. "Someone you should have been nicer to." They played in silence after that. The game had moved past conversation into something purer, more brutal. Every move mattered now. Every decision carried weight. Nathan tried everything. Tactical combinations that had destroyed grandmasters. Positional squeezes that had made grown men resign. But Emily saw through all of it, deflecting his attacks with minimal moves, never wasting time, never giving him the chaos he needed. By move 35, Nathan's advantage had evaporated. By move 40, he was fighting for a draw. By move 45, he was losing. The Meridian Room had never been this quiet. 16 people watching two players bent over a board, the only sound the soft click of pieces on wood and the increasingly rapid rhythm of Nathan's breathing. He was sweating, actually sweating, something he couldn't remember doing in years. His coffee had gone cold, his phone had buzzed 6 times with messages he didn't care about, and none of it mattered because he was losing to a waitress in front of everyone who mattered. "You're going to resign," Emily said softly. Not a question. "No. Your position is lost. You have maybe 6 moves before checkmate. You know it. I know it. Everyone watching knows it. Then play them out." "Why? So you can delay the inevitable? So you can pretend there's still hope?" Nathan's hand tightened around his king. "Because I said so." Emily nodded slowly. "Okay, if that's what you want." She made her next move, and Nathan saw the whole sequence. Unavoidable, elegant, absolutely devastating. She'd been planning this for at least 10 moves, building the trap while he'd been too angry to notice. He had one chance. One desperate, stupid chance. Nathan glanced toward the bar, caught Thomas's eye, and gave the smallest nod. What happened next happened fast. Thomas moved toward Emily with a fresh coffee, stepping between her and the board. In the split second her attention was divided, Nathan reached across, adjusting his position just slightly. Nothing illegal, nothing obvious, just enough to change the geometry of the attack she'd built. But Emily's hand was already moving. She grabbed her bishop, started to place it on the square that would have sealed his fate, and Thomas chose that exact moment to set down the coffee cup. It didn't spill. That would have been too obvious. But the sound, the movement, made Emily's hand twitch. The bishop landed one square to the left of where she'd intended. The wrong square. Nathan's heart jumped. Touch move rule. The piece stays. Emily looked down at the board, and Nathan watched her face cycle through comprehension, anger, and something that might have been fear. She'd just blundered, badly. The bishop was hanging, completely undefended, and if Nathan took it, her entire attack would collapse. "That's not where I meant to put it," she said quietly. "Doesn't matter. You touched it. You moved it. It stays. Club rules. You had Thomas distract me. I had Thomas bring you coffee. If you can't handle distractions, you shouldn't play in public." Emily looked at Thomas, who had gone very pale and very British, and was staring at a point on the wall like he desperately wished to be anywhere else. "Mr. Vale," Thomas started. "The rules are clear," Nathan said. "Aren't they, Thomas?" Silence. "Aren't they?" "Yes," Thomas said finally, barely audible. "Touch move is standard." Nathan reached for the bishop, already planning his next 6 moves. He'd take the piece, consolidate his position, and grind out the endgame. It wouldn't be pretty, but it would be a win, and that's what mattered. His fingers were an inch from the bishop when Emily spoke. "Take it," she said. Nathan paused. "What?" "Take the bishop. You want it so badly. Take it." Something in her voice made Nathan hesitate. She wasn't panicking, wasn't pleading. She was calm. Too calm. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." Nathan took the bishop. Emily smiled. It wasn't a big smile, barely there, really, but it was the smile of someone who'd just won something important, and Nathan felt ice in his stomach. She moved her queen. Nathan stared at the board. "No." Emily moved her rook. "No, no, no." She moved her knight, and Nathan saw it, all of it, the entire sequence. She'd sacrificed the bishop on purpose. Let him take it. Let him think he'd won, and now… That's checkmate in 3 moves, Emily said quietly. You can play them out if you want, or you can resign. Nathan looked at the board, looked at Emily, looked at the 16 people watching him with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed joy. He tipped over his king. The sound of it hitting the board was the loudest thing in the Meridian room. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Harrison Webb started clapping, slow and deliberate, and the sound spread through the room like wildfire. Margaret Hale was laughing. Michael Chen was shaking his head in disbelief. Even Thomas had this tiny smile, quickly suppressed but definitely there. Emily stood up, smoothed down her shirt, and extended her hand across the board. $50,000, she said. Cash. Tonight. Nathan stared at her hand like it was a weapon. You cheated. I didn't. You had that sequence planned from the beginning. The bishop blunder was deliberate. Yes, that's strategy, which is what chess is. You attack, I defend, I counterattack. You tried to cheat by having Thomas distract me. I turned your cheat into my trap. That's not against the rules, that's just better chess. Nathan wanted to argue, wanted to flip the board, call security, do something to stop this from being real. But he couldn't, because she was right. She'd played him perfectly, and he'd walked into it like an amateur. The money, Emily said again, her hand still extended, steady as stone. You promised. Nathan pulled out his phone, opened his banking app, and made the transfer. $50,000. From his account to hers. The transaction completing with a soft chime that sounded like the end of the world. There, he said. You got what you wanted. Congratulations. Not quite, Emily said. You also promised an apology. I'm not… You said if I won, you'd get on your knees and apologize to everyone in this room. Or were you lying? The Meridian room went silent again, but this was a different silence. Hungry, expectant. Everyone waiting to see if Nathan Vale would actually do it. He looked around the room. At Gerald Fisk, who'd come back in to see what the commotion was. At Harrison and Margaret and Michael and all the others who'd sat across from him and lost and hated themselves for it. Slowly, Nathan stood up. Slower still, he got down on his knees. The carpet was expensive, but it still hurt. I apologize, he said, the words tasting like poison. For being cruel. For turning chess into a weapon. For all of it. He looked up at Emily, expecting triumph, expecting smugness, expecting anything except what he saw. Sadness. You're still missing the point, she said quietly. This was never about me beating you. It was about you understanding what you've been doing to people. I understand. No, you don't. But maybe someday you will. She turned to leave, and Nathan felt something crack inside him, pride or ego or whatever part of him had needed this to end differently. Who are you? He called after her. Really? Emily stopped at the door, her hand on the frame, and looked back. My name is Emily Rowe, she said. And my father was Dr. David Rowe. He taught mathematics at Columbia. 20 years ago, he developed an algorithm for high-frequency trading that would have changed everything. He was going to publish it, share it with the academic community, make it open source so everyone could benefit. Nathan's blood went cold. But someone stole it, Emily continued. Stole the research, stole the patents, built an empire on my father's work while he got nothing. The stress destroyed him. Heart attack at 53, dead before the ambulance arrived. And the person who stole everything? She smiled, and it was the cruelest expression Nathan had ever seen. That was you, Mr. Vale. Your entire fortune, every dollar, every asset, every bit of power you've used to hurt people. All of it came from my father's algorithm, the one you took when you were a 22-year-old intern at Steinberg Capital, the one you claimed as your own. Nathan couldn't breathe. I have the original proof, Emily said. Dated, notarized, my father's handwriting on every page. I've had it for 8 months. Ever since I started working here, watching you, learning everything about you, and now I'm going to take it to every law firm, every newspaper, every regulatory agency that will listen. You can't prove… I can prove all of it. And after tonight, after you humiliated yourself in front of everyone who matters, nobody's going to defend you. Nobody's going to believe the brilliant Nathan Vale didn't cheat his way to the top. She pulled her apron back on, tied it carefully, and picked up her tray of glasses. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Mr. Vale, Emily said. I have tables to clear. She walked out of the Meridian room and Nathan stayed on his knees, unable to move, unable to think, while around him the walls of his carefully constructed empire began their long, inevitable collapse. Nathan stayed on his knees for exactly 47 seconds after Emily left. He counted them, each one stretching longer than the last, while 16 pairs of eyes burned holes in his back. Then he stood up, brushed off his pants like nothing had happened, and walked out of the Meridian room without looking at anyone. His driver was waiting outside, the black Mercedes idling in a loading zone that would have gotten anyone else a ticket. Nathan slid into the back seat and pulled out his phone. Home, Mr. Vale? Marcus asked from the front. Office. Sir, it's almost 11, Sam. Office, now. The car pulled into traffic and Nathan started making calls. First to his head of legal, a woman named Catherine Marsh, who charged $800 an hour and earned every penny. She picked up on the second ring. Nathan, it's late. This better be. Someone's going to come after me with stolen IP claims. I need you to pull every document from the Steinberg Capital days, every contract, every NDA, every piece of paper with my name on it. Silence on the other end. Then, what happened? Just do it. I want everything on my desk by morning. Nathan, if someone's making accusations, we need to discuss strategy before... Morning, Catherine. Not negotiable. He hung up and dialed his CFO, Michael Brennan, who was probably already asleep and wouldn't appreciate being woken. Nathan didn't care. Yeah? Michael's voice was thick with sleep and irritation. The algorithm, the trading algorithm the entire company is built on. I need the original patent documentation, all of it. Why? Nathan, what's going on? Can you get it or not? I can get it, but it's going to take time. That stuff is buried in archives from before you even incorporated. Some of it might be... How long? A week, maybe 2, if, you have 3 days. Nathan ended the call and stared out the window at Manhattan sliding past. Streetlights, late-night delis, a couple arguing on the corner of Madison and 72nd. Normal people living normal lives. Completely unaware that several blocks away a waitress had just detonated a bomb under a billion-dollar empire. His phone buzzed. Text from Harrison Webb. That was the most entertaining Thursday I've had in years. Drinks next week? Nathan deleted it without responding. Another buzz. Margaret Hale this time. She destroyed you. I've never seen anything like it. Who is she? Delete. Michael Chen. If even half of what she said is true, you're fucked. Nathan turned off his phone. The Vale Capital offices occupied floors 30 through 34 of a glass tower in Midtown. At this hour, the building was mostly empty except for security and the handful of analysts who practically lived in their cubicles. Nathan took the private elevator to 34, his executive floor, and went straight to his office. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A desk made from a single piece of walnut that cost more than a car. Bookshelves lined with first editions he'd never read and awards he didn't remember winning. Everything designed to project power, success, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Nathan poured himself 3 fingers of scotch from the bar cart and sat down at his desk. David Rowe. The name had been buried for so long Nathan had almost convinced himself it didn't matter. Almost convinced himself the story he'd been telling for 10 years was the truth. He'd been 22, fresh out of Princeton with a degree in mathematics and enough arrogance to think he was smarter than everyone in the room. Steinberg Capital had hired him as a junior analyst, the kind of position where you worked 80-hour weeks and hoped someone important would eventually notice. Nathan had noticed David Rowe instead. Dr. Rowe hadn't worked for Steinberg directly. He'd been a consultant, brought in to advise on quantitative strategies. Brilliant, quiet, the kind of person who could explain complex mathematics like he was discussing the weather. He'd treated Nathan like a colleague instead of a grunt, had actually listened when Nathan asked questions. They'd worked together for 6 months, Dr. Rowe developing his algorithm, Nathan helping with the implementation, testing the models against historical data. The results had been incredible. Consistent returns, minimal risk, the kind of edge that could make someone wealthy beyond imagination. Then Dr. Rowe had said something that changed everything. I'm going to publish this, he told Nathan one evening, the two of them alone in a conference room at Steinberg. Make it open source. Imagine what could happen if everyone had access to this kind of tool. It could democratize trading, level the playing field. Nathan had thought he was joking, but Dr. Rowe had been serious, completely, naively serious. You'd give away something worth billions? Nathan had asked. It's not about worth, it's about what's right. And Nathan had realized in that moment that Dr. Rowe was never going to make money from his own genius. That someone else would take the algorithm, modify it just enough to skirt patent laws, and build an empire. It happened all the time in finance. So Nathan had decided that someone might as well be him. He'd copied everything, the research, the code, the documentation, spent a weekend rewriting the variable names, changing the structure just enough to claim it was his own innovation. Then he'd gone to Steinberg's senior partners and pitched it as his breakthrough. They'd believed him. Why wouldn't they? Nathan was young, hungry, exactly the kind of ambitious climber they valued. And Dr. Rowe was just some academic consultant who'd probably forget about the whole thing once his contract ended. Except Dr. Rowe hadn't forgotten. He'd come to Nathan first, before going to lawyers or making any formal accusations. Nathan remembered that conversation with perfect clarity. The hurt in Dr. Rowe's eyes, the confusion, like he couldn't understand how someone he'd trusted could do this. "You stole my work," Dr. Rowe had said. "I improved your work. There's a difference. Nathan, please, just admit what you did. We can fix this. I'll agree to a partnership. There's nothing to fix. The algorithm is mine. I developed it. You were a consultant who provided some initial guidance, and I'm happy to acknowledge that contribution. But the core innovation? That's all me." Nathan had watched Dr. Rowe's face cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally resignation. "You'll regret this," Dr. Rowe had said quietly. "I really don't think I will." Dr. Rowe had tried to fight it. Hired a lawyer, filed complaints with Steinberg's ethics board, even reached out to the SEC. But Nathan had covered his tracks well. The paper trail pointed to him, the patents were in his name, and Dr. Rowe couldn't prove the original idea was his. The stress had broken him. Nathan had heard about the heart attack third hand, a footnote in an email from someone at Columbia. By then, Nathan had already left Steinberg to start his own fund, the algorithm making him millions in the first year alone. He'd assumed that was the end of it, that Dr. Rowe's death had closed the book on that chapter. He'd never thought about a daughter. Nathan drained his scotch and poured another. His phone was still off, but he could imagine the messages piling up. Questions from board members, concerns from investors, gleeful speculation from competitors who'd love to see him fall. By morning, everyone would know something had happened at the Meridian Room. By afternoon, they'd be digging into why. He needed to move fast. Nathan turned his phone back on and called his head of PR, a shark named Jessica Chen, who specialized in making scandals disappear. "It's midnight," she said by way of greeting. "I need damage control, full press. Someone's making accusations about IP theft from 20 years ago." "Jesus, Nathan. Are the accusations true? Does it matter? For my strategy? Yes. Absolutely it matters." Nathan hesitated. Jessica was loyal, but she was also pragmatic. If she thought he was too toxic to defend, she'd drop him without hesitation. "There's some truth to it," he said carefully. "But it was 20 years ago. The original claimant is dead, and everything's been legally settled. This is just someone trying to rewrite history." "Who's the someone?" "A waitress named Emily Rowe, daughter of the original claimant." "Does she have proof?" "She says she does." "And do you think she actually does, or is she bluffing?" Nathan thought about Emily's face as she told him about her father. The absolute certainty, the careful planning. You didn't spend 8 months working at the Meridian Room just to bluff. "She has something," he said. Jessica sighed. "Okay, I'll start prepping a response. We'll position this as a disgruntled family member trying to profit from tragic circumstances. Paint you as the victim of extortion. But Nathan, I need to know everything, every detail, every document, every conversation, because if I get surprised, I walk." "Understood. And one more thing, stop talking to people. No interviews, no statements, no late-night phone calls to reporters you think are friends. Everything goes through me." "Fine." Nathan hung up and realized his hands were shaking, actually shaking, like he was some nervous intern instead of a man who'd built an empire. He stood up, paced to the windows, looked out at the city below. Somewhere down there, Emily Rowe was probably celebrating. Maybe she'd gone home to a cramped apartment in Queens or Brooklyn, somewhere she could barely afford on a waitress salary. Maybe she was on the phone with lawyers, planning her next move. Or maybe she was at another chess club, watching another game, patient as death. The intercom on his desk buzzed. Nathan didn't remember buzzing anyone, but his secretary's voice came through anyway. "Mr. Vale, there's a Thomas Blackwell here to see you. He says it's urgent." Nathan froze. "Send him in." Thomas entered looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. His usual composure had cracked, his tie was loose, and there was sweat on his forehead despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "Nathan, I'm so sorry. She told me it was about bringing her coffee. I didn't realize." "Sit down, Thomas." Thomas sat, perched on the edge of the leather chair like he might need to run at any moment. "How long have you known her?" Nathan asked. 8 months. Like I said, she applied for the waitress position. Her references checked out. She seemed before that. How long before she came to the Meridian room did you know her? Thomas went pale. Don't lie to me. Not now. She couldn't have gotten hired without your approval, and the Meridian room doesn't hire people off the street. So how did she get to you? Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the building's ventilation and the distant sound of a car alarm on the street below. 3 months before she started, Thomas said finally. She came to me with a proposition, said she needed to get close to you, needed to understand how you operated, offered me $10,000 just to hire her. And you said yes. I said no, at first. But then she told me about her father, showed me the documentation, patents, research notes, everything, and she told me what you'd done. Nathan's jaw tightened. What I'd allegedly done. Nathan, I saw the proof. Your name isn't on any of the original research. Dr. Rose is, and the dates don't lie. So you decided to help her destroy me. I decided to let her apply for a job. What happened after that? The chess, the wager, tonight, that was all her. I just gave her access. For $10,000. No, I gave the money back. After I saw the documents, I did it because it was the right thing to do. Nathan laughed, sharp and bitter. The right thing? You're a manager at a private club that exists so rich people can pretend they're special. Don't pretend you have moral authority. Thomas stood up, and for the first time since Nathan had known him, there was steel in his voice. I've worked at the Meridian Room for 15 years. I've watched you come in every Thursday and tear people apart for fun. Gerald Fisk, Harrison Webb, Michael Chen, all of them. You treat chess like warfare and people like casualties. So when someone came along who could beat you at your own game, yes, I helped, and I'd do it again. Get out. Nathan, get out of my office. You're fired. I'll have security escort you from the building. Thomas nodded slowly, like he'd expected this. For what it's worth, she didn't want to hurt you. She just wanted justice for her father. There's a difference. There's really not. Thomas left, and Nathan was alone again. He pulled out his laptop and started searching. Emily Rowe, social media, public records, anything that would give him leverage. But she barely existed online. No Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter. Just a LinkedIn profile that listed her as a graduate student at NYU, degree in mathematics. No current employment listed. Graduate student, mathematics. Just like her father. Nathan dug deeper, pulling up NYU's directory. Emily Rowe was listed as a doctoral candidate in applied mathematics, currently on academic leave. Her advisor was Dr. Sarah Chen, a professor Nathan vaguely recognized from conference circuits. He found Dr. Chen's email and started composing a message, then stopped. What was he going to say? Please confirm your student is trying to destroy my career? What? That would just make him look desperate. Instead, he searched for Dr. David Rowe's published papers. There were dozens, spanning 2 decades of research in quantitative finance, algorithmic trading, mathematical modeling. The last paper was dated 6 months before his death, unfinished, never submitted for publication. Nathan downloaded it and started reading. The mathematics was dense, complex, exactly the kind of work that had made Dr. Rowe respected in academic circles. But buried in the appendix was something Nathan recognized, an early version of the algorithm, not quite refined, but unmistakably the foundation of everything Nathan had built. And in the acknowledgments section, Dr. Rowe had written, "With thanks to my daughter Emily, whose insight and patience made this work possible. Nathan's stomach dropped. She'd helped him develop it. She hadn't just inherited her father's research, she'd been part of creating it, which meant she understood the algorithm better than almost anyone alive, better than Nathan did. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You're probably researching me right now, finding out I'm not just some waitress." "Good. You should know exactly who's coming for you." Nathan stared at the message, his blood going cold. Another text. "I gave you a chance to be decent tonight, to apologize, to show even a hint of humanity. You couldn't even do that convincingly." And another. "So now we do this the hard way. Sleep well, Mr. Vale." Nathan tried to call the number. It went straight to voicemail, a generic automated message. He threw his phone across the room. It hit the far wall and cracked, the screen going dark. For a long time, Nathan sat in his office, staring at nothing, feeling the walls close in. He'd built everything on a foundation of theft, and now the ground was crumbling beneath him. The worst part was knowing that Emily had planned this perfectly. The 8 months at the Meridian Room, watching his games, learning his patterns. The careful performance tonight, letting him think he was in control right up until the moment she crushed him. Even the blundered bishop, she'd predicted he would cheat, had built her trap around that prediction. She'd played him like he was an amateur, and now she was going to destroy him with the same methodical precision she'd used to destroy his position on the board. Nathan's office door opened without warning. Catherine Marsh walked in, her expression grim. "I pulled the Steinberg files," she said. "We have a problem." "How bad?" "Worse than bad. The original IP assignment documents, the ones that would prove you developed the algorithm independently, they're not in the archives." "What do you mean they're not there?" "I mean, they don't exist, Nathan. There's no paper trail establishing you as the original creator. Everything we have shows you implementing an existing system, not inventing a new one. And if someone has documentation proving Dr. Rowe developed it first..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Nathan stood up, walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the cool glass. "Can we settle?" he asked quietly. "With who?" "If Emily Rowe goes public, we're not dealing with a civil suit. We're dealing with fraud charges, SEC violations, possibly criminal theft of trade secrets. You can't settle your way out of that." "Then what do we do?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful, measured. "You tell me the truth. All of it. And then we figure out if there's any way to survive this." Nathan turned around, looked at his lawyer, one of the best in New York, someone he'd paid millions over the years, and saw doubt in her eyes. "I stole it," he said, 20 years ago. David Rowe developed the algorithm. I copied it, claimed it as my own, and built everything on that foundation. He tried to fight me and I buried him. Then he died, and I thought that was the end." "Jesus, Nathan. Can you defend me? Against what? The truth?" Catherine ran a hand through her hair, a rare break in her usual polish. "I can try to mitigate damages, argue statute of limitations, claim independent development, throw up enough legal smoke that it takes years to sort out. But if she has concrete proof, dated documents, original research notes, anything with timestamps, we're going to lose." "How long do I have?" "Until she goes public? Could be days, could be hours. Depends on her strategy." Nathan's phone buzzed again, the cracked one he'd thrown, somehow still functioning. He picked it up, squinting at the damaged screen. Another message from Emily. "Your legal team is probably telling you to fight this. Don't. You'll lose, and you'll lose ugly. There's a better way." Nathan showed the message to Catherine, who frowned. "Don't respond," she said. "This could be..." Another message came through. "I'm offering you a choice. Meet me tomorrow, noon, Columbus Park. Come alone. We can end this quietly, or I can end it loudly. Your decision." "It's a trap," Catherine said immediately. "She's trying to get you to say something incriminating, probably wearing a wire, definitely recording. Or she's offering a settlement." "Nathan, you can't seriously be considering..." "What else do I have? You just said we're going to lose." Catherine's expression hardened. "Fine. You want to meet her? I'm coming with you. And we're recording everything too." She said alone. "And I'm saying if you go alone, you're an idiot. This is a negotiation, Nathan. Start acting like it." Nathan looked at the message again. "Columbus Park, noon. Public enough to be safe, private enough for a real conversation." He typed back, "I'll be there." The response came immediately. "Good. And Mr. Vale, bring your checkbook. We have a lot to discuss. Nathan handed the phone to Catherine, who read the messages with increasing concern. This is a mistake, she said. Probably. I mean it. She's controlling every aspect of this. The timing, the location, the terms. You're walking into her game. I've been in her game since I sat down across from her tonight. At least this way I can see the board. Catherine started to argue, then stopped. She knew Nathan well enough to recognize when he'd made a decision. Fine, she said, but we prepare. I want to know everything about Emily Rowe by morning. Her finances, her associates, her academic record, any legal history. If she has vulnerabilities, we find them. And if she doesn't, then you'd better hope she's willing to deal, because the alternative is watching everything you've built disappear. Catherine left, and Nathan was alone again in his office, the city lights below offering no comfort. He thought about Emily, probably in her apartment right now, planning her next move. She'd beaten him at chess, humiliated him in front of his peers, and now she was dictating terms for his surrender. But Nathan hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by accepting defeat. If Emily wanted to play games, he'd play. And maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to turn this around. He just had to figure out what she really wanted, because nobody spent 8 months planning revenge just for money. There was something else driving her, something deeper than justice for her father. And if Nathan could find that pressure point, he might still have a chance. He pulled out his backup phone and started making calls. Nathan didn't sleep. He sat in his office until 4 a.m, making calls, reading files, building a profile on Emily Rowe that would have made a private investigator proud. By the time the sun came up over Manhattan, he knew everything there was to know about her. Or thought he did. Emily. Marie Rowe, 30 years old, born in Ithaca, New York. Mother died when she was 6. Cancer. Raised by her father after that, David Rowe, who'd moved them to Manhattan when he got the consulting position at Steinberg Capital. Straight A's through high school, full scholarship to MIT for undergraduate mathematics, then Columbia for her master's. Started the doctoral program at NYU 3 years ago, went on academic leave 2 years in. Financial records showed she was drowning. Student loans that would take decades to pay off. Credit card debt. A third-floor walk-up in Washington Heights where the rent was 2 months overdue. She'd worked 6 different jobs in the last 3 years. Coffee shops, tutoring, test prep, whatever paid. The Meridian Room gig was her most recent and probably her most stable. But buried in her academic records was something interesting. Emily had published 2 papers in the last year, both in prestigious journals, both on algorithmic trading strategies. The mathematics was advanced, elegant, and according to the citations, generating significant interest in quantitative finance circles. She was brilliant. Not just smart, but genuinely brilliant in the same way her father had been, which made her dangerous. Nathan's backup phone rang at 6. Catherine, already at her office despite the hour. I found something, she said without preamble. Emily Rowe filed a complaint with the SEC 4 months ago. Alleged securities fraud related to Vail Capital's trading algorithms. Nathan's stomach dropped. What happened with it? Nothing yet. It's still under preliminary review. But if she has the documentation she claims, that complaint could trigger a full investigation. Can we kill it? The complaint? No. Once it's filed, it's in the system. But we can try to discredit the source. Show she has financial motivations, a grudge, a history of making unsubstantiated claims. Does she? Not that I can find. Her record is clean. No lawsuits, no complaints, not even a parking ticket. She's either genuinely squeaky clean or very good at hiding things. Nathan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. What about her academic leave? Why would someone drop out of a doctoral program 2 years in? I'm working on that. Her advisor at NYU isn't talking, but I have a contact in the mathematics department. Give me a few hours. We don't have a few hours. The meeting's at noon. Then go to the meeting, but don't agree to anything. Stall. Get her to show her cards. And for the love of everything, don't admit to anything on record. Nathan hung up and checked his watch. 6:15. He had 6 hours to figure out how to survive this. He went home to shower and change, the penthouse apartment feeling like a museum of someone else's life. Expensive furniture he'd never chosen, art he'd never looked at, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of a city that suddenly felt hostile. His phone kept buzzing with messages, board members wanting updates, investors asking careful questions, competitors smelling blood in the water. Nathan ignored all of them. At 11:30, he left for Columbus Park. The park sat in Chinatown, wedged between Bayard and Worth Streets, a small patch of green that served as a gathering place for elderly Chinese immigrants who came to play mahjong and practice Tai Chi. Nathan had never been there before, had probably driven past it 1,000 times without noticing. Emily had chosen well, public enough that he couldn't try anything stupid, obscure enough that they wouldn't be swarmed by people who recognized him. She was already there when he arrived, sitting on a bench near the pavilion, feeding pigeons from a paper bag. She'd changed out of her waitress uniform into jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, her hair down instead of pulled back. She looked younger like this, less like someone who'd just destroyed his life, and more like a graduate student enjoying a sunny afternoon. Nathan sat down on the bench, leaving a careful foot of space between them. "You came alone," Emily said, still focused on the pigeons. "You asked me to." "And you always do what people ask?" "Only when they have leverage." Emily smiled slightly, tossed another handful of breadcrumbs. A pigeon landed near Nathan's shoe, and he resisted the urge to kick it away. "I hate pigeons," he said. "Most people do, but they're survivors. They adapt, they thrive in environments that would kill other birds. There's something admirable about that." "Is that what you are, a survivor?" Emily finally looked at him, and Nathan was struck by how calm she seemed. No triumph, no anger, just a kind of tired resolution. "My father died when I was 17, she said. "Heart attack in his office at Columbia. They said it was quick, that he probably didn't suffer. But I know better. I'd watched him deteriorate for months after you stole his work. The stress, the sleepless nights, the way he'd just sit at his desk staring at nothing. He died because you broke him. So yes, I'm a survivor. Because the alternative was letting you break me too." Nathan wanted to defend himself, to explain that business was brutal and people got hurt, and that was just how the world worked. But the words stuck in his throat. "What do you want?" he asked instead. "Justice." "Be specific." Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder, old and worn, the edges frayed from years of handling. She set it on the bench between them. "This is my father's original research, dated, notarized, with his handwriting on every page. The algorithm you built your empire on, it's all here, in his words, developed over 2 years before you claimed to invent it." Nathan didn't touch the folder. "That doesn't prove I stole it." "No, but this does." She pulled out a second folder, thinner, and opened it to reveal a series of emails. Nathan recognized his own email address from 20 years ago, the Steinberg Capital domain he'd used as an intern. "You sent these to yourself," Emily said, her voice flat. "My father's research files, his code, everything. You copied it all from the shared server and emailed it to your personal account. Then you deleted the original emails from the server, but you forgot something." She pointed to one of the printouts. "Server logs. Steinberg kept backups of everything, including deletion logs. I filed a discovery request through my SEC complaint, and they pulled these for me last week." Nathan's blood went cold. He'd been so careful, had covered his tracks so meticulously, but he'd been 22 and arrogant, and the idea that server logs would still exist 2 decades later hadn't occurred to him. "These logs show you accessing my father's files 17 times in a 2-week period," Emily continued. "Downloading them, copying them, sending them to external email addresses. And the timestamps match exactly with when you presented your algorithm to Steinberg's partners." She closed the folder with a soft snap. "So when I ask what I want, the answer is simple. I want you to admit what you did, publicly. I want you to return every dollar you made for my father's work. And I want you to face criminal charges for fraud and theft of intellectual property." Nathan stared at the folders like they were live grenades. Everything she'd said was true, and they both knew it. But admitting it meant destroying everything, his company, his reputation, probably his freedom. "That's not going to happen," he said quietly. "Then I go public. Tomorrow. I've already written the press release. I have meetings scheduled with the Wall Street Journal, the Times, Bloomberg. I have my lawyer ready to file a criminal complaint with the Manhattan DA's office. And I have every major investor in Vail Capital on a list to receive copies of this documentation. You destroy the company. Hundreds of people work for me. Pension funds are invested in us. You'd hurt a lot of innocent people just to get revenge." Emily's laugh was sharp and bitter. Don't you dare try to make this about protecting others. You didn't think about innocent people when you stole from my father. You didn't think about me, growing up without a parent, because the stress you caused killed him. You thought about yourself, your ambition, your money. So don't pretend you've suddenly developed a conscience. Nathan leaned back, feeling the situation slip further from his control. He needed leverage, needed something to bargain with, but Emily had thought of everything. How much? He asked. Excuse me? How much money would make this go away? I'll write you a check right now. 10 million, 20. Name your price. Emily stood up, and for a second Nathan thought she was walking away. But instead she moved to stand in front of him, looking down with an expression of pure contempt. You really think this is about money? That I spent 8 months planning this, worked as your waitress, studied every aspect of your life just to shake you down for a payout? Everyone has a price. Not me. Because unlike you, I actually cared about my father. And unlike you, I understand that some things matter more than money. She picked up the folders, holding them against her chest like they were precious. You have 24 hours, she said. Admit what you did or I do it for you. Those are the only options. Nathan stood up too, his mind racing. Wait. Just wait. You want justice for your father? Fine. I'll set up a foundation in his name, fund mathematics scholarships, endow a chair at Columbia. We can make sure his legacy actually means something instead of just destroying mine. His legacy is the algorithm you stole. Returning it is what makes his legacy mean something. I can't just return it. The algorithm is the foundation of everything. You take that away, and Vail Capital collapses. Hundreds of employees lose their jobs. Retirement accounts get wiped out. You'd be hurting people who never did anything to you. Emily's expression didn't change. Those people work for a company built on fraud. If it collapses, that's on you, not me. I'm just telling the truth. She started to walk away, and Nathan felt panic rise in his chest. What if I give you the company? He said desperately. Emily stopped. What? Vail Capital, I'll sign it over to you. Controlling interest, board seats, everything. You can run it, change it, do whatever you want with it. Just don't go public with this. Emily turned around slowly. You'd give me your company. Yes. The company you built by stealing my father's work. Yes. She studied him for a long moment, and Nathan couldn't read her expression. Let me get this straight, she said finally. You'd rather give me billions of dollars in assets than admit you stole them in the first place. I'd rather find a solution that doesn't destroy everything. No, you'd rather avoid consequences. There's a difference. Emily walked back to the bench, sat down, and gestured for Nathan to sit too. He did, wary, feeling like he was being set up for something, but not sure what. Here's what's going to happen, Emily said. You're going to go back to your office and prepare a full confession. Every detail of how you stole my father's algorithm, how you built your company on that theft, how you've been profiting from his work for 20 years. You're going to submit that confession to the SEC, the DA's office, and every major financial publication. And then you're going to resign from Vail Capital and surrender any claim to assets derived from the stolen algorithm. That's insane. That's justice. Emily, please, be reasonable. There has to be a middle ground here. There isn't. You either tell the truth or I tell it for you. Those are the only options. Nathan felt something snap inside him. You self-righteous. Do you have any idea what you're asking? I've worked for 20 years to build this. I've earned my success. You've earned nothing. You stole everything. I improved the algorithm. I made it better, more efficient, more profitable. Your father's version was academic theory. I turned it into something practical. Using his foundation, his mathematics, his genius. So what? You want me to pretend I didn't contribute anything? That every decision I made, every refinement, every implementation was nothing? Emily stood up again, and this time Nathan could see rage breaking through her calm exterior. You want credit for improving something you stole? Fine. I'll make sure everyone knows you're an excellent thief, a talented fraud, someone who saw genius and had just enough skill to profit from it. Is that the legacy you want? Nathan stood too, his hands clenched into fists. Around them, elderly Chinese immigrants were starting to notice the argument, conversations in Cantonese pausing as they turned to watch. You're making a mistake, Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous. I have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers, investigators, people who can make your life very difficult. You go public with this, and I'll bury you in litigation for the rest of your life. Threaten me all you want. It doesn't change the facts. Facts can be disputed. Documents can be challenged. You think those server logs are ironclad? I'll have experts testify they're unreliable. I'll argue that your father's research was collaborative, that he encouraged me to develop the algorithm. I'll drag this out for years until you run out of money and patience." Emily smiled, and it was the coldest expression Nathan had ever seen. "Go ahead, try. Because while you're fighting me in court, I'll be giving interviews, writing articles, making sure everyone knows exactly who Nathan Vale really is. Your reputation will be destroyed before the first deposition, and you'll spend millions of dollars losing anyway." She started to walk away again, and Nathan grabbed her arm. It was a mistake. Emily spun around, jerked her arm free, and stepped back. Her hand went to her pocket, and Nathan saw her pull out her phone. "Did you just grab me?" she asked loudly, her voice carrying across the park. "Did you just physically assault me in public?" People were definitely watching now. An old woman with a mahjong tile still in her hand, a young mother with a stroller, a couple of teenagers who'd probably post this on social media before the day was out. Nathan raised his hand, stepping back. You were just what? Trying to intimidate me? Threaten me? After everything else, you thought physical force would work?" "Emily, please. You have 24 hours, Mr. Vale. After that, everything goes public. And if you ever touch me again, I'll add assault charges to the fraud." She walked away fast, and Nathan stood there in Columbus Park, feeling dozens of eyes on him, his carefully controlled empire crumbling in real time. His phone buzzed. "Catherine, tell me you didn't just threaten her," she said when he answered. "How did you—" "Because I'm sitting in my office watching a video of you grabbing her arm. It's already on Twitter, 3 different angles, you idiot." Nathan felt the world tilt. "I barely touched her." "Doesn't matter, the optics are terrible. Billionaire physically confronting woman who's accusing him of fraud? You just handed her the narrative on a silver platter." Nathan started walking, not sure where he was going, just needing to move. "What do I do?" he asked. "Damage control. Immediately. We release a statement saying you were attempting a private conversation that got heated. You regret any misunderstanding. You respect Ms. Rowe's right to voice her concerns." That makes me sound guilty. You are guilty, Nathan. The question is whether we can mitigate the damage or if you're determined to make this as bad as possible. Nathan reached his car where Marcus was waiting. He climbed into the back seat and closed his eyes. "Catherine, I need options. Real options. Not damage control or mitigation. Ways to actually win this." Silence on the other end. Then, "There aren't any. Not anymore. She has the documentation, she has the server logs, and now she has video of you getting physical with her. The best we can hope for is a settlement that doesn't include criminal charges. She won't settle. Then we're done. I'll start preparing bankruptcy proceedings for Vale Capital, because once this breaks, your investors will pull out so fast it'll make your head spin." Nathan opened his eyes, stared out at Chinatown, the narrow streets and crowded sidewalks, the chaos of normal life continuing while his world ended. "There has to be something," he said quietly. "There isn't. I'm sorry, Nathan. You gambled on being smarter than everyone else, and you lost. It happens." She hung up. Nathan sat in the car, his phone buzzing with new messages and alerts, the video of him grabbing Emily spreading across social media like wildfire. He watched it play on Twitter, over and over, from different angles. Each time it looked worse. "Mr. Vale?" Marcus asked from the front seat. "Where to?" Nathan didn't answer. He was thinking about chess, about the game last night, about how Emily had built her trap so carefully, how she'd predicted his every move, planned for his cheating, turned his own aggression against him. She'd done the same thing in real life, spent 8 months learning his patterns, understanding his weaknesses, building a position he couldn't escape from. But chess games could be resigned. Real life was messier. Nathan pulled out his phone and made a call. Not to Catherine, not to his PR team, but to someone he'd sworn he'd never contact again. Marcus Fisher answered on the 3rd ring. "Nathan Vale," Marcus said, his voice carrying a thick German accent and years of barely concealed contempt. "I wondered when you'd call. I need your help." "Of course you do. What kind of help?" "The kind you're good at. Making problems disappear." Marcus laughed, low and unpleasant. I don't do that anymore. I'm legitimate now. Consulting. Above board work only. I'll pay whatever you ask. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? Another pause. Tell me about the problem first. Nathan explained everything. Emily, the stolen algorithm, the documentation, the server logs, the video that was currently destroying his reputation in real time. Marcus listened without interrupting, and Nathan could almost hear him thinking, calculating. This Emily Rowe, Marcus said finally. She sounds smart. She is. Smarter than you, maybe. Maybe? And you want me to, what? Threaten her? That worked so well for you in the park. I want you to find something I can use. Everyone has secrets, Marcus. Everyone has something they don't want exposed. Find hers. And if she doesn't, then dig deeper. Her friends, her colleagues, her academic advisor. Someone in her life has leverage. I just need to find it. Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, harder, more like the person Nathan remembered from years ago. This will cost you, not in money, but in favors. You'll owe me, Nathan, and I collect on my debts. I understand. Good. I'll call you in 24 hours. The line went dead. Nathan sat in the car, feeling the last pieces of his moral architecture crumble. He'd told himself for years that the theft from David Rowe was a one-time thing, a youthful mistake he'd moved past. But now he was hiring someone to dig up dirt on the man's daughter, to find leverage through intimidation or blackmail. He was becoming exactly what Emily had accused him of being, but survival mattered more than principles. Home, Mr. Vale? Marcus asked again from the front seat. No, Nathan said. Office. I have work to do. The car pulled into traffic, and Nathan watched Columbus Park disappear behind them. Emily was probably already home, uploading more documentation, preparing her media blitz. She thought she'd won, thought she had him cornered with no moves left. But Nathan had built an empire on seeing opportunities others missed. And he wasn't done fighting yet. 23 hours later, Nathan still didn't have a plan. He'd spent the night pacing his office, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago, refreshing his phone every 30 seconds to watch his world collapse in real time. The video from Columbus Park had gone viral. 3 million views and counting. Think pieces were already appearing. Billionaire bullies woman seeking justice. The toxic culture of Wall Street. How men like Nathan Vale represented everything wrong with American capitalism. His name was trending on Twitter, and not in a good way. Vale Capital's stock had dropped 18% in after-hours trading. 3 board members had called emergency meetings. His biggest investor, a pension fund out of California, had sent a letter requesting detailed information about the fraud allegations. And Emily Rowe had gone silent. No more texts, no press releases, nothing. Just the ticking clock counting down to her deadline. Nathan's phone rang at 11:45. Marcus Fisher. Tell me you found something, Nathan said immediately. I found things. Whether they're useful is another question. Just tell me. Marcus's voice carried that particular tone of someone delivering bad news. Emily Rowe is clean. Almost suspiciously clean. No criminal record, no financial impropriety, no personal scandals. She pays her taxes on time, volunteers at a literacy center in Harlem, and by all accounts is well liked by everyone who knows her. There has to be something. Let me finish. Her academic career is interesting. She was on track for a prestigious postdoc at Princeton, had job offers from 3 major hedge funds, could have gone anywhere she wanted. Then 2 years ago, she dropped everything, left her program, turned down the offers, took a leave of absence that's technically still ongoing. Nathan sat up straighter. Why? Her advisor wouldn't say, but I found someone who would, a former classmate who works at Morgan Stanley now. According to him, Emily's father left her something in his will. Not money, because David Rowe died broke, but documentation. Research notes, server logs, everything related to his work at Steinberg Capital. We already know about the documentation. Yes, but here's what you don't know. Emily spent 2 years trying to do this legally. She filed complaints with the SEC, reached out to lawyers, tried to build a case through proper channels. Every single attempt went nowhere. The statute of limitations had passed, the evidence was circumstantial, and she didn't have the resources to fight a protracted legal battle against your army of lawyers. Marcus paused, and Nathan could hear papers shuffling on the other end. So she changed strategies, Marcus continued. She realized she couldn't beat you in court, but she could beat you in public opinion. That's when she applied to work at the Meridian Room. That's when she started planning this whole elaborate chess game. She spent 8 months studying you, learning your patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Tell me something I can use, Marcus. I'm getting there. Emily has a younger brother. Andrew Rowe, 25, lives in Portland. He's an addict. Opioids. Started after a skiing accident 3 years ago. Got bad enough that he's been in and out of rehab 4 times. Emily has been paying for his treatment out of her own pocket, which is why she's drowning in debt. Nathan felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. Where is he now? Currently in a facility in Oregon. Expensive place, very private. Emily wired them $8,000 last week to keep him there another month. Can we get to him? Physically? Sure. But Nathan, listen to me carefully. If you go after her brother, you cross a line you can't uncross. Emily will fight back twice as hard, and you'll look even worse than you already do. I'm already destroyed. What's a little worse? The difference between losing your company and going to prison. You threaten her family, she'll have you arrested for extortion, and unlike the IP theft, that case would be easy to prove. Nathan closed his eyes, feeling the trap Emily had built closing from every angle. Even the one potential leverage point he'd found was booby-trapped. Is there anything else? He asked. One thing, Emily's advisor at NYU, Dr. Sarah Chen. She's the one who approved Emily's academic leave, and according to my source, she's very protective of her students. But Dr. Chen also sits on the board of a mathematics foundation that receives significant funding from your company. Nathan's eyes opened. How significant? $2 million a year? Endowed scholarships, research grants, the whole thing. If that funding disappeared, the foundation would have to cut half its programs. And Dr. Chen would want to prevent that. Presumably. Though using it as leverage is risky. Academics don't respond well to financial threats. And if Emily finds out you tried to pressure her advisor, it's just more ammunition. Nathan stood up, walked to his window, looked out at Manhattan. Somewhere in this city, Emily was preparing to destroy him. And all he had were bad options, and worse ones. Do it anyway, he said. Contact Dr. Chen very carefully, very subtly. Just make sure she understands that continued funding depends on the foundation maintaining good relationships with Vail Capital's interests. Nathan, I don't have time for ethics lectures, Marcus. Just do it. He hung up and checked his watch. 12:15. Emily's deadline had passed 15 minutes ago. His phone buzzed immediately. Not a call, but an email. From an address he didn't recognize, subject line blank. Nathan opened it. The email contained a single link to a document hosted on a secure server. Nathan clicked it, his heart pounding, and found himself staring at a press release scheduled to go live in 2 hours. The headline read, Billionaire Nathan Vail's empire, built on stolen algorithm, says daughter of deceased mathematician. Below that, everything. The full story of David Rowe's algorithm, the server logs showing Nathan's theft, quotes from academic experts confirming the mathematics were identical, even copies of emails Nathan had sent 20 years ago that he'd thought were deleted forever. At the bottom of the press release was a note in red text. You had 24 hours to do the right thing. You chose not to. This goes live at 3 p.m. unless you call me. A phone number followed. Nathan dialed it, his hands shaking. Emily answered on the first ring. Mr. Vail? Don't publish that. Give me a reason not to. I'll give you whatever you want. Money, the company, a public apology. Name it. I already named it 24 hours ago. You refused. Emily, please, let's talk about this. Face to face, just the two of us. No lawyers, no threats, just a conversation. Like the conversation we had in Columbus Park, the one where you grabbed my arm and tried to intimidate me. I'm sorry about that. I was frustrated. I wasn't thinking clearly. But I'm thinking clearly now, and I understand that you have every right to be angry. Emily laughed, sharp and bitter. You don't get to apologize your way out of this. You stole from my father. You built an empire on his work. You destroyed his life and never looked back. And now you want me to believe you've suddenly developed a conscience? I want you to believe I'm trying to find a solution that doesn't hurt innocent people. Then confess. Publicly? Return what you stole. Face the consequences. That's the solution. Nathan's grip tightened on the phone. I can't do that. Then we're done talking. Wait, just wait. What if I could prove your father wanted me to have the algorithm? Silence on the other end. Then, excuse me? What if there was documentation showing your father and I had an agreement? That he was mentoring me, encouraging me to develop the algorithm for commercial use? That he understood I'd be the one to implement it? That's a lie. Is it? You were 17 when he died. How much do you really know about his work relationships? About his plans for the algorithm? I know he wanted to make it open source. He told me that. People say a lot of things they don't mean. Maybe he told you that because it sounded noble, but in private, he and I had a different arrangement. Maybe he knew the algorithm was too valuable to give away and he chose me to be his partner in commercializing it. Emily's voice went cold. You're going to forge documents. I'm going to find documents that already exist, emails, meeting notes, anything that shows your father and I worked together. And if I can't find them, maybe I remember conversations that other people at Steinberg can corroborate. They'll be lying. Probably, but can you prove that? You have server logs showing I accessed files. I'll have witnesses saying your father gave me permission to access those files. Suddenly your slam dunk case becomes he said, she said, and those kinds of cases drag on for years. Nathan could hear Emily breathing on the other end, could almost feel her rage through the phone. You're going to destroy my father's reputation to save your own, she said quietly. I'm going to present an alternative narrative. Let the public decide who to believe. The public will believe the billionaire with unlimited resources and a team of lawyers. They always do. Exactly. So maybe instead of fighting me, you consider a compromise. I'll set up that foundation I mentioned. The David Rowe Center for Mathematical Research. $50 million, fully endowed, in your father's name. You can run it, shape his legacy however you want, and in exchange, you walk away from this crusade. $50 million to buy my silence. $50 million to honor your father's memory in a way that actually helps people. Think about it, Emily. You publish that press release and what happens? We fight in court for years. Maybe you win, maybe you don't. But either way, your father's name gets dragged through the mud as we argue about who deserves credit for what. Is that really what you want? More silence. Nathan pressed his advantage. Or you take the money, build something meaningful, and your father's legacy becomes about advancing mathematics instead of about being a victim. Which story would he prefer? You don't get to speak for him. Neither do you. He's been dead for 13 years. All we can do is make choices we think he'd respect. And I think he'd respect a choice that helps future mathematicians more than one that destroys current ones. Emily's laugh was hollow. You really believe your own justifications, don't you? You've told yourself this story so many times that you actually think you're the reasonable one. I think I'm the practical one. You want justice. I'm offering you something better. Impact. Real, tangible impact on people's lives. That's worth more than revenge. It's not revenge, it's truth. Truth is subjective. Impact isn't. Nathan heard something in the background on Emily's end. A voice maybe, or a door closing. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Less angry, more tired. I need time to think, she said. You have 2 hours before that press release goes live. Think fast. Don't tell me what to do. Then don't make me fight you the way I know how. Because I will win, Emily. Maybe not cleanly, maybe not fairly, but I will win. I've been playing this game a lot longer than you have. Is that a threat? Nathan hesitated. He was standing on the edge of something, about to say words that would define what kind of person he really was. It's a reality check, he said finally. You're smart, you're determined, and you have right on your side. But I have resources, connections, and 20 years of experience destroying people who get in my way. You think you've planned for everything, but you haven't. Because you're still playing by rules I stopped following a long time ago. What does that mean? It means I know about your brother. The silence that followed was absolute. What about my brother? Emily asked, her voice dangerous. Andrew, 25. Currently in rehab in Portland. Very expensive rehab that you're paying for by working yourself into the ground and drowning in debt. If you go anywhere near him, I don't need to go near him. I just need to make a phone call to his facility. Explain that there's been a misunderstanding about payment, that the funds you wired might be connected to fraudulent activity, that they should probably hold off on providing treatment until things get sorted out. That's extortion. That's motivation. You publish that press release, and your brother loses his treatment. He relapses, ends up on the street. maybe dies. All because you chose revenge over his life. Emily's breathing had changed, faster, angrier. You would do that. You would threaten an addict, someone who's sick, just to save yourself. I would do whatever it takes to protect what I've built, same as you'd do whatever it takes to protect your brother. We're not that different, Emily. We're nothing alike. Keep telling yourself that. But we both know you're already doing the math, weighing your brother's life against your need for justice, trying to figure out if there's a way to have both, or if you're going to have to choose. Nathan heard something that might have been a sob, quickly suppressed. I hate you, Emily said quietly. I know, but hate doesn't change the situation. You can publish that press release and lose your brother, or you can take my offer and save him. Those are your options. There's a third option, which is, I publish the press release, you make good on your threat, and I add extortion and blackmail to the criminal complaints I file. You might hurt my brother, but you'll definitely go to prison. Nathan felt ice in his stomach. She was right. He just confessed to extortion on a phone call that was probably being recorded. Are you recording this? He asked. What do you think? I think you're smarter than I gave you credit for. And I think you're exactly as despicable as I thought you were. Congratulations, Mr. Vale. You just proved every accusation I made about you. The line went dead. Nathan stared at his phone, feeling the situation spiral completely out of control. He'd threatened her brother, admitted it on tape, and given her ammunition she could use to destroy him even more thoroughly than the original fraud allegations. He'd panicked, made the exact mistake he'd spent 20 years training himself not to make. His office door opened without warning. Catherine Marsh stood there, her face pale. Tell me you didn't threaten her brother, she said. How did you? Because I just got a call from Emily Rowe's lawyer. They have a recording of your entire conversation, including the part where you threatened to cut off a recovering addict's medical treatment. They're prepared to file criminal charges within the hour unless you agree to their terms. Nathan sat down heavily. What terms? Catherine pulled out a document and dropped it on his desk. Full public confession. Resignation from Vale Capital effective immediately. Transfer of all assets derived from the stolen algorithm to a trust managed by Emily Rowe. And a formal apology to be delivered at a press conference tomorrow morning. That's everything. That's everything. Plus, they're demanding you surrender yourself for criminal prosecution. No plea deals, no reduced charges. You take full responsibility and face whatever consequences the DA decides are appropriate. Nathan looked at the document, the words blurring together. And if I refuse, then the recording goes public, the press release goes live, and you'll face extortion charges on top of the fraud. Emily's lawyer was very clear. They have you on tape threatening a disabled person's medical care. That's a felony in New York, Nathan. You could get 7 years just for that. Nathan's hands were shaking. I didn't mean it. I was just trying to scare her. Doesn't matter, you said it. It's recorded, and intent is irrelevant for extortion charges. He stood up, paced to the window, pressed his forehead against the glass. 34 floors below, Manhattan continued its endless motion, completely indifferent to his crisis. There has to be a way out, he said quietly. There isn't. You lost, Nathan. You lost the chess game, you lost the PR battle, and now you've lost the legal battle. The only question is whether you surrender with some dignity or whether we drag this out and make it worse. Nathan closed his eyes. He thought about his empire, built over 20 years, about to crumble in a single day, about his reputation, his legacy, everything he'd worked for turning to ash. And he thought about Emily Rowe feeding pigeons in Columbus Park, calm and certain and absolutely unbreakable. What happens if I confess? He asked. Best case scenario? You get 3 to 5 years in a minimum security facility. You lose the company, obviously, lose most of your assets, but you'd still have enough to be comfortable when you get out, assuming you invested wisely over the years. And worst case? 10 years, federal prison, complete financial ruin. Depends on how angry the prosecutors are and how much public pressure there is. Nathan turned around. What would you do? Catherine met his eyes. I'd confess. Take the deal. Try to salvage what little dignity you have left. But I'm not you, Nathan. I didn't build an empire by taking the easy way out. There's nothing easy about this. No. But it's the right thing, and maybe, somewhere deep down, you know that. Nathan looked at the document on his desk, looked at Catherine, looked at his office with its expensive furniture and meaningless awards. "I need to make a call," he said. Catherine nodded and left. Nathan picked up his phone and dialed Emily's number. She answered immediately. "Have you made a decision?" she asked. "I want to meet. One more time. Face to face. Just us. No lawyers, no recordings. I'll come to wherever you are." "Why?" "Because I need to understand something. You've won. You have everything you wanted. So why do I get the feeling this isn't about justice at all?" Emily was quiet for a moment. "Where I live, 1 hour. Come alone." She gave him an address in Washington Heights and hung up. Nathan told Marcus to bring the car around. The address led to a fifth-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better days probably 30 years ago. Nathan climbed the stairs, his expensive shoes echoing on cracked linoleum, passing doors with peeling paint, and the smell of cooking food mixing with mildew. Emily's apartment was at the end of the hall. She opened the door before he could knock. "Come in," she said. The apartment was tiny. A studio, maybe 400 square feet, with a kitchenette that barely fit a stove and a refrigerator that hummed too loudly. A futon doubled as both couch and bed. A desk covered in papers and textbooks sat under the only window. On the wall, a single photograph. Emily as a child with her father, both of them smiling at a chessboard. Nathan stood in the middle of the room, feeling absurdly out of place in his $3,000 suit. "This is where you live," he said. "This is where I live." "While I have a penthouse on Park Avenue." "Yes." "Because I stole your father's work." Emily gestured to the futon. "Sit." Nathan sat. Emily remained standing, arms crossed, looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. "You wanted to understand why I'm doing this," she said. "So I'll tell you. When my father died, I was 17, still in high school, no other family, nowhere to go. His life insurance had lapsed because he couldn't afford the premiums. His savings were gone, spent on lawyers trying to fight you. I ended up in foster care for 6 months until I turned 18. She moved to the window, looking out at the street below. "I survived. Got scholarships, worked 3 jobs, made it through MIT and Columbia. Built a life for myself despite everything. And I told myself I'd moved past what you did, that I'd forgiven the past and focused on the future. But you hadn't. No. Because every time I struggled to pay rent, every time my brother needed help I couldn't afford to give, every time I had to choose between food and textbooks, I thought about you. Living in luxury built on my father's genius, and I realized forgiveness was just another word for giving up." Emily turned to face him. "So I spent 2 years planning this. Every detail, every move. I studied you like you were a chess opponent, learned your patterns, found your weaknesses, and I realized the only way to beat you was to make you beat yourself. The chess game was just the opening. Everything else, the press release, the recordings, the leverage, that was the end game. But I needed you to see it coming, to know you were losing, to feel what my father felt when you destroyed him." Nathan stood up. "You wanted me to suffer. I wanted you to understand there's a difference." "Is there?" Emily moved closer and Nathan could see tears in her eyes. "My father wasn't perfect. He was naive, too trusting, believed people were fundamentally good. But he was brilliant and kind, and he deserved better than to die broken because someone he trusted betrayed him. And you didn't just steal his work, Nathan. You stole his faith in people, his hope, his future. You took everything that mattered and turned it into money. I can't undo that." "No, but you can admit it. You can face consequences. You can stop pretending you earned something you stole. That's all I want. Not revenge, just truth." Nathan looked at her, 30 years old, living in a shoebox apartment, drowning in debt, fighting a battle she should have lost a dozen times over. And somehow she'd won anyway. "If I confess," he said slowly, "if I do everything you're asking, what happens to you?" "What do you mean? You've spent 2 years on this, sacrificed your career, your education, your life. Once it's over, what's left?" Emily smiled, sad and tired. "I don't know. Maybe I finish my doctorate. Maybe I become a teacher. Maybe I just try to be the person my father thought I could be." "That's not much of a plan. It's more than you'll have. At least I'll be free." Nathan nodded slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I'm going to call my lawyer," he said. Tell her I'm accepting the terms. Full confession, resignation, everything. But I have one condition. You're not in a position to make conditions. Just one. The $50 million for the foundation. That still happens. In your father's name. You run it however you want, but it exists. That's non-negotiable. Emily studied him. Why? Because you're right. He deserved better. And maybe this is the only way I can give him something close to what he should have had. That doesn't erase what you did. I know, but it's something. And something is better than nothing. Emily considered this. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay. The foundation happens, but you don't get to be involved. Not your name, not your input, nothing. It's for my father, not for you. Agreed. Nathan made the call to Catherine, explained his decision. She tried to talk him out of it one more time, but he cut her off. Just draw up the documents, he said. I'll sign them tomorrow. He hung up and looked at Emily. It's done, he said. You won. Emily didn't look triumphant. She just looked tired. Nobody won, she said quietly. My father's still dead. Your company's still collapsing. All we did was make sure the truth came out. That's not winning. That's just ending. Nathan moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, he said, you're the best opponent I've ever faced. On the chessboard and off it. That's not a compliment. It is, actually, the highest one I can give. He left, walking down 5 flights of stairs and out into the Washington Heights evening. Marcus was waiting with the car. Where to, Mr. Vale? He asked. Nathan looked back up at the building, at the window on the 5th floor where a light still burned. Home, he said. I think I'm done for the day. The car pulled into traffic, and Nathan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 20 years of lies finally lift. It hurt more than he'd expected. But Emily was right. At least now he was free. The press conference was scheduled for 10 in the morning at the Waldorf Astoria, neutral territory that Catherine had chosen specifically because it was public enough to prevent Nathan from backing out, but prestigious enough to maintain some shred of dignity. Nathan arrived at 9:30, walking through a gauntlet of reporters and camera crews already setting up in the hotel's grand ballroom. Flashes went off in his face. Questions were shouted that he didn't answer. Someone from CNN tried to block his path until hotel security intervened. Catherine was waiting in a side room, along with Emily and her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Torres, who looked like she'd spent the entire night preparing for battle. Mr. Vale, Rebecca said, without offering her hand. We have the documents ready for your signature. The stack of papers was 3 inches thick. Confession of fraud. Resignation from Vale Capital. Transfer agreements for assets totaling nearly $2 billion. A statement to be read aloud at the press conference, every word carefully negotiated over the last 18 hours. Nathan picked up a pen, then paused. Can I have a moment with Emily? He asked. Alone. Rebecca started to object, but Emily touched her arm. It's fine, Emily said. 5 minutes. Catherine and Rebecca left, though neither looked happy about it. The door closed, and Nathan and Emily were alone in a room that had probably hosted 1,000 business negotiations over the years. None of them had felt quite like this. Cold feet? Emily asked. Second thoughts, Nathan said, about whether this is actually going to accomplish anything. It'll accomplish justice for my father. Will it? He's still dead. Vale Capital is still going to collapse, taking hundreds of jobs with it. The algorithm will probably end up getting buried in legal proceedings for years. Who does any of this actually help? Emily sat down in one of the chairs, and Nathan noticed for the first time how exhausted she looked. Dark circles under her eyes, hair that hadn't been washed in a couple of days, the weight of 2 years of planning finally catching up to her. You want me to say this was all worth it, she said quietly, that justice makes everything better, that holding you accountable somehow brings my father back or fixes what was broken. But I can't say that because I don't know if it's true. Then why are we doing this? Because the alternative was letting you keep winning, keep profiting from theft, keep destroying people at chess tables for fun while pretending you earned the right to feel superior. Emily looked up at him. At least this way, people know the truth. That counts for something. Does it? Yes. It has to. Nathan sat down across from her, the two of them facing each other like they had at the Meridian Room just 2 nights ago. It felt like years had passed since then. I've been thinking about that chess game, Nathan said. The blundered bishop. You knew I'd cheat, didn't you? You predicted it, planned for it, turned it into your trap. Yes. How? Emily smiled slightly. Because I watched you play for 8 months. I saw how you treated opponents when you were winning, the cruelty, the humiliation, the need to not just beat them, but break them. And I knew that when you were losing, you'd get desperate, do whatever it took to avoid that feeling of powerlessness. So you gave me the opportunity to cheat. I gave you the opportunity to show who you really are. You chose to take it, Nathan nodded slowly. That's what this whole thing has been, hasn't it? Not just about exposing the fraud, but about exposing me, making me reveal my own ugliness. You did that yourself. I just set up the board. And now we're at the end game. Now we're at the end game, Emily agreed. Nathan looked at the stack of documents waiting for his signature. 20 years of his life reduced to legal boilerplate and transfer agreements. When you beat me at chess, he said, you told me I was missing the point, that it wasn't about you winning, it was about me understanding what I'd been doing to people. Have I understood, or am I still missing it? Emily was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard it before. I think you understand what you did. I'm not sure you understand why it mattered. To my father, mathematics wasn't about making money or gaining an advantage. It was about finding truth, sharing knowledge, making the world a little bit better. You took that and turned it into a weapon, into a way to accumulate power. That's the part I don't think you'll ever really get. Because I'm too broken? Because you're too scared of being ordinary, of being vulnerable, of admitting you're not as special as you need to believe you are. Nathan felt something crack inside him, not anger this time, but something closer to grief. My father died when I was 8, he said quietly. Heart attack, same as yours. But he didn't leave me any legacy except debt and disappointment. I spent my whole childhood watching my mother work 3 jobs to keep us afloat, watching her slowly give up on everything she'd wanted from life. And I promised myself I'd never be powerless like that, never be at the mercy of other people's decisions. So you decided to be the one making the decisions. I decided to be the one who won, no matter what it cost. And what did it cost? Nathan looked at her. Everything that mattered. Emily nodded, like she'd expected that answer. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your father too. But Nathan, you can't use your pain as an excuse to cause more pain. That's not survival. That's just spreading the damage. I know that now. Do you? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? Nathan stood up, walked to the window, looked out at New York. The city where he'd built his empire, where he'd transformed himself from a scared kid into someone people feared. And now it was all coming apart. I don't know, he admitted. I've spent so long being the person I thought I needed to be that I'm not sure who I actually am underneath. Maybe there's nothing there. Maybe I really am just ambition and fear held together by expensive suits. There's something there, Emily said. Something that felt guilty enough to offer my father's foundation. That's not nothing. It's also not enough. No, but it's a start. Nathan turned around. What happens to you after this? After the press conference, after the legal proceedings, after everything settles? What do? I told you. Finish my doctorate, maybe teach, try to build a life that would make my father proud. That's still not much of a plan. Emily laughed, tired but genuine. Says the man who's about to have no plan at all. At least I'm not facing criminal charges. Fair point. Nathan walked back to the table, picked up the pen and started signing documents. His confession, his resignation, the transfer agreements, page after page, his signature destroying everything he'd built. When he finished, he looked up at Emily. The foundation, he said. I meant what I said. 50 million, in your father's name, no strings attached. But I need you to promise me something. I'm not in the mood for conditions. Not a condition, a request. Use it to help people like you, kids who lost parents, who are drowning in debt, who have the talent but not the resources. Give them what you didn't have. Emily took the signed documents, her expression unreadable. Why does it matter to you? Because maybe if something good comes from this mess, it won't have been completely pointless. I can't undo what I did to your father, but maybe I can keep it from happening to someone else's. That sounds like you're trying to buy redemption. I'm trying to do something that isn't completely selfish for the first time in 20 years. If that's buying redemption, I'll take it. Emily gathered the documents into a folder. Okay, the foundation helps kids like me. But Nathan, that doesn't make us even. It doesn't erase what you did or make you a good person. It just means you're capable of one decent act after a lifetime of terrible ones. I know. Good. As long as we're clear. Rebecca and Catherine came back in, and the lawyers took over, verifying signatures, organizing the documents, preparing for the press conference. Nathan stood to the side, watching it all happen like he was outside his own life. Catherine pulled him aside. Last chance to back out, she said quietly. We could still fight this. Claim duress, argue the extortion recording was entrapment. It'd be ugly, but we might survive. No, Nathan said. I'm done fighting. Let's just get this over with. The press conference started exactly at 10. The ballroom was packed. Reporters from every major outlet, cameras from 3 networks doing live coverage, and in the back, a handful of people Nathan recognized from Vail Capital's board of directors. They'd come to watch him fall in person. Nathan walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces waiting for his confession. My name is Nathan Vail, he began, reading from the statement Catherine and Rebecca had negotiated. 20 years ago, when I was 22 years old and working as an analyst at Steinberg Capital, I stole proprietary research from Dr. David Rowe, a consulting mathematician who had developed a groundbreaking algorithm for high-frequency trading. The room erupted in flashes and shouted questions. Nathan waited for the noise to die down, then continued. I copied Dr. Rowe's work without permission, claimed it as my own innovation, and used it to build what eventually became Vail Capital. Everything I've achieved in the last 20 years, every dollar earned, every accolade received, every success celebrated, was built on that initial theft. His voice was steady, mechanical, reading words that had been carefully crafted to admit guilt without providing ammunition for criminal prosecution. But standing there, speaking the truth out loud for the first time, Nathan felt something unexpected. Relief. Dr. Rowe attempted to challenge my theft through legal channels. I used superior resources and legal representation to defeat those challenges. The stress of that fight, combined with financial devastation from legal fees, contributed to Dr. Rowe's fatal heart attack at age 53. He died without recognition for his work, without compensation, and without justice. Nathan paused, looked up from the statement, found Emily standing at the back of the room. Until now, he added, off script. His daughter, Emily Rowe, has spent the last 2 years documenting the truth about her father's work. She has proven, beyond any reasonable doubt, that I built my empire on stolen genius, and she has forced me to finally face consequences I should have faced 20 years ago. Catherine was making cutting motions from the side of the room, trying to get him back on script, but Nathan ignored her. I am resigning from Vail Capital effective immediately. I am transferring all assets derived from the stolen algorithm to a trust that will be managed by Emily Rowe for the benefit of her father's legacy. And I am cooperating fully with authorities to ensure that appropriate criminal charges are filed. The room exploded again, reporters shouting over each other, cameras pushing forward for better angles. Nathan raised his voice. I spent 20 years telling myself that I deserved my success, that I'd improved on Dr. Rowe's work enough to earn credit. That business was brutal, and people got hurt, and that was just reality. But those were lies, comfortable lies that let me sleep at night and feel superior during the day. He looked directly at Emily now. The truth is simpler and uglier. I was a scared kid who saw an opportunity to stop being powerless, and I took it without caring who it hurt. I turned theft into empire and cruelty into strategy, and I convinced myself that winning made me right. Nathan's hands were shaking. He gripped the podium to steady them. To Emily Rowe, I offer an apology that will never be sufficient. To everyone who worked at Vail Capital, who invested in our funds, who trusted my leadership, I am profoundly sorry for building your livelihoods on a foundation of fraud. And to David Rowe, who deserves so much better than what I gave him, I hope that this confession and the foundation being established in his name represents a small step toward the justice he was denied. Nathan folded the statement, looked out at the cameras. I have no excuses. I have no justification. I made choices that destroyed lives, and I'm finally facing the consequences of those choices. That's all I have to say. He walked away from the podium as questions erupted behind him. Catherine intercepted him, her face pale. What the hell was that? She hissed. Half of what you said wasn't in the statement. You just gave prosecutors everything they need for a maximum sentence. Good. Nathan said. Maybe I should have done it 20 years ago. He left through a side door, avoiding the crush of reporters, and found himself in a service hallway that smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. Emily was there, waiting. That was more than we agreed to, she said. I know. You're going to prison, probably for a long time. I know that too. Emily studied him, and Nathan couldn't tell what she was thinking. Do you feel better? She asked. Now that you've confessed? Nathan considered the question. No, but I feel less heavy. Is that the same thing? I don't know. I've never carried guilt like yours. Lucky you. They stood in the hallway, two people who'd destroyed each other in different ways, and neither of them seemed to know what to say next. My brother, Emily said finally. Andrew, if he relapses after this, after you threatened him, that's on you too. Nathan felt shame wash over him. I never actually made the call to his facility. I just said I would. But that doesn't make it better, does it? No. For what it's worth, I'll make sure the foundation includes funding for addiction treatment. Something good should come from something that ugly. You can't fix everything with money. I'm starting to understand that. Emily turned to leave, then stopped. Nathan, when you get out of prison, assuming you survive it, what are you going to do? I have no idea. Figure it out. Because the world doesn't need another Nathan Vale using intelligence as a weapon. It needs whatever person you might become if you actually dealt with your fear instead of weaponizing it. She walked away, and Nathan was alone in the service hallway, his empire in ruins, his future reduced to whatever a judge decided, and somehow feeling more human than he had in decades. The criminal proceedings moved faster than Catherine had predicted. The Manhattan DA, sensing political opportunity and genuine outrage, filed charges within a week. Wire fraud, securities fraud, theft of trade secrets, and because the prosecution was feeling ambitious, racketeering, Nathan pleaded guilty to everything. His lawyer begged him to fight at least some of the charges, to negotiate for reduced sentences, to use every legal tool available. But Nathan was done fighting. He stood in court, admitted his guilt in detail that made the judge's eyebrows rise, and accepted the sentence without appeal. 12 years. Federal prison, minimum security, eligible for parole after 8 if he maintained good behavior. The day he turned himself in, Nathan's assets were completely frozen. Vale Capital had already collapsed, its investors fleeing to safer funds, its employees scattering to competitors. The algorithm that had made billions was confiscated as evidence, probably to be buried in government archives and forgotten. Everything Nathan had built disappeared in less than a month, but the David Rowe Foundation survived. Emily had used the $50 million to establish something genuine, not just scholarships, but a full program for kids who'd lost parents and were trying to pursue mathematics or computer science despite financial devastation. The first class of fellows was announced 6 months after Nathan went to prison, and according to the news article someone sent him, Emily had given a speech about her father that made people cry. Nathan spent his first year in prison learning what powerlessness actually felt like. Not the abstract fear of it he'd carried since childhood, but the concrete reality. Shared cells and communal showers, and following orders from guards who didn't care that he used to be a billionaire. Being nobody, with nothing, and having to figure out who he was underneath. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. In his second year, Nathan started teaching chess. The prison had a recreation room with a few battered boards, and someone had noticed him playing alone, working through games from memory. Word spread that he'd been some kind of chess genius on the outside, and inmates started asking for lessons. Nathan agreed, with one condition: no money, no favors, no debts, just chess. He taught them the same way David Rowe had taught him, all those years ago before Nathan had betrayed that trust. With patience, with respect, focusing on beauty and strategy instead of domination. And something strange happened. The anger that had driven him for 20 years started to loosen its grip. By his third year, Nathan was running a full chess program. He'd convinced the warden to buy better boards, had organized a tournament that became an annual event, and had started writing letters to mathematics teachers at local schools, asking if they wanted someone to teach chess to struggling students by correspondence. Emily answered one of those letters. I heard what you're doing, she wrote. Teaching chess to inmates, trying to make it about learning instead of winning. My father would have appreciated that. I'm not ready to forgive you, and I'm not sure I ever will be. But I think he'd want me to acknowledge that you're trying to be different, so I'm acknowledging it." They started corresponding. Short letters at first, careful and formal. Emily would tell him about the foundation, about the students they were helping, about her own life. She'd finished her doctorate, was teaching at Columbia now, in her father's old department. Nathan would tell her about the chess program, about the inmates he was teaching, about slowly learning to exist without the armor of wealth and power. Neither of them mentioned the past directly. The betrayal, the theft, the destruction. It sat between them like a chessboard after checkmate. Still there, still real, but the game was over. In his 5th year, Nathan got a letter that wasn't from Emily. "My name is Andrew Rowe," it began. "You don't know me, but you threatened to cut off my rehab funding 2 years ago when you were trying to hurt my sister. I wanted you to know that I've been clean for 18 months now. I'm working at a community center in Portland, helping other addicts find treatment, and I'm alive because Emily refused to let your threat stop her from doing the right thing." The letter continued. "Emily doesn't know I'm writing this. She'd probably tell me not to. But I thought you should know that the worst thing you ever threatened to do, taking away my treatment, letting me die, didn't happen. And somehow I'm okay, and my sister is okay, and we're building lives that matter. Despite you. Maybe even because of you in some weird way." Nathan read that letter 3 times, then put it with Emily's letters in a box under his bed. Evidence that he'd been terrible, yes, but also evidence that terrible people could sometimes, maybe, become slightly less terrible. By his 7th year, Nathan was up for parole. The hearing was brief. The board reviewed his record. Model prisoner, no incidents, actively contributing to the prison community through his chess program. They noted his age, his health, the likelihood of reoffending. "Mr. Vale," the board chair said, "you pleaded guilty to crimes that destroyed a company, hurt hundreds of investors, and built a fortune on theft. Why should we release you early?" Nathan thought about all the answers he could give, that he'd paid his debt, that he'd learned his lesson, that he deserved a second chance. But in the end, he told the truth. "You shouldn't," he said. "I don't deserve early release. I probably don't deserve release at all. But if you let me out, I'll spend whatever time I have left trying to teach people that intelligence without integrity is just another form of violence. I'll keep running chess programs for people who need something constructive to focus on, and I'll never ever pretend that my success made me special or that my fall made me a victim." The board chair studied him. "That's not exactly a compelling argument for parole." "I know, but it's the only honest one I have." They released him 2 months later. Nathan walked out of prison with nothing. No money beyond the small account the federal government had allowed him to keep, no job prospects, no connections who'd return his calls, just a box of letters and a chess set that one of the inmates had made for him as a goodbye present. Emily met him at the gate. Nathan stopped short, genuinely shocked. "What are you doing here?" "Making sure you don't immediately do something stupid," she said. "Get in the car." She drove him to a halfway house in Queens, a building that made her old Washington Heights apartment look luxurious by comparison. But it was clean, it was safe, and it had a chessboard in the common room. "I talked to the director," Emily said as they stood outside. "Told her about your prison program. She's willing to let you start something similar here if you follow the rules and don't cause problems." "Why would you do this for me?" Emily looked at him, and Nathan saw someone who'd spent 7 years processing anger and grief, and had come out the other side not exactly forgiving, but maybe understanding. "Because my father believed people could change," she said. "He believed in redemption, in second chances, in the idea that intelligence should be used to build things instead of destroying them. And even though you stole from him, even though you broke him, I think he'd want me to see if that belief was justified." "What if it's not? What if I can't actually change?" "Then you go back to prison, and I stop wasting my time. But Nathan, you spent 20 years being one kind of person. Maybe you can spend the next 20 being another kind. That's up to you." She handed him a folder. Inside was information about the David Rowe Foundation, along with a proposal. "We're expanding the chess program," Emily explained, "taking it into prisons, halfway houses, community centers, places where people need structure and purpose and something beautiful to focus on. I need someone to run it who understands chess and understands what it means to lose everything. The pay is terrible, and the work is hard, and you'll spend the rest of your life in your father's shadow, making up for what you did." Nathan looked at the proposal, then at Emily. "This is a job offer? This is a chance. What you do with it is up to you." Nathan thought about the Meridian Room, about playing chess to humiliate people, about using intelligence as a weapon. Then he thought about teaching inmates to see beauty in combinations, about letters from recovering addicts, about the possibility of being someone different. "I'll take it," he said. "Good. You start Monday. Don't be late." Emily turned to leave, then paused. "Nathan, my father used to say that chess teaches you how to lose gracefully, that the measure of a player isn't how they win, but how they handle defeat. You've lost everything. The question is whether you can lose it gracefully enough to find something worth building from the ruins." "What do you think?" Nathan asked. "I think you're capable of it, but I also thought you were capable of decency 20 years ago, and I was wrong. So prove me right this time." She left, and Nathan stood outside the halfway house with a folder full of second chances and absolutely no idea if he deserved them. But maybe that was the point. Maybe deserving had never been what mattered. 10 years later, the David Rowe Foundation operated chess programs in 43 states, serving thousands of at-risk youth and incarcerated individuals. Nathan ran the curriculum development, traveling to prisons and community centers, teaching people who'd lost everything how to find beauty in 64 squares. He never got rich again, never regained his reputation, never stopped being known as the guy who stole billions and went to prison. But on a Thursday afternoon in a community center in the Bronx, Nathan sat across a chessboard from a 15-year-old kid named Marcus whose father had died 2 years ago and whose family was drowning in debt. The kid was raw talent wrapped in anger, moving pieces like he was trying to hurt them. "You're playing too aggressive," Nathan said quietly. "Chess isn't about destroying your opponent. It's about finding the truth of the position." "What truth?" Marcus snapped. "That I'm going to lose? That winning and losing aren't the point. Understanding is the point. Beauty is the point. Using your intelligence to build something instead of tearing things down." Marcus made a move, aggressive and flawed. Nathan showed him why it didn't work, then showed him a better option. They played for an hour, and slowly, the anger in Marcus's moves transformed into something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or hope. When the session ended, Marcus looked at Nathan. "You really were a billionaire." "I really was." "And you gave it all up to teach chess to broke kids in the Bronx?" "I didn't give it up. I lost it because I stole it in the first place. There's a difference." Marcus considered this. "So you're like trying to make up for it?" "I'm trying to be someone who uses intelligence to help people instead of hurting them. Whether that makes up for anything, I have no idea. But it's better than who I used to be." The kid nodded slowly, like he was processing something important. Nathan packed up the chess pieces, the same set that had been made for him in prison 12 years ago, and thought about Emily. She'd stopped by the program 6 months ago, watching from the back of the room as Nathan taught. After class, she told him that her father would have been proud of what they'd built. It was the first time she'd said anything like that, and Nathan had nearly cried. They still weren't friends. Probably would never be friends. Too much history, too much pain. But they were colleagues, united by the memory of a man whose genius had been stolen and whose legacy had become something bigger than either of them. Nathan walked out of the community center into a Bronx evening, took the subway home to an apartment that cost $800 a month, and felt something he'd never felt in the penthouse on Park Avenue. Peace. Not happiness, exactly. Not forgiveness or redemption or any of the easy words people use to describe transformation. Just the quiet knowledge that he was doing something that mattered to someone other than himself. The scared kid who'd stolen an algorithm to escape powerlessness was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true power came from choosing to be decent even when no one was watching. It had taken losing everything to learn that lesson, and Nathan would spend the rest of his life wishing he'd learned it sooner. But some lessons only stick when they cost you everything. And as Nathan walked through the Bronx, past bodegas and basketball courts and ordinary people living ordinary lives, he finally understood what Emily had meant that night in Washington Heights. Nobody had won their chess game. Nobody had won their battle. They'd just survived it, and in surviving had learned something about who they actually were beneath the anger and the fear and the need to prove themselves. It turned out Nathan Vale wasn't a genius, wasn't special, wasn't destined for greatness. He was just a person who'd made terrible choices and had somehow been given the chance to make better ones. That would have to be enough. Because unlike chess, life didn't give you the option to reset the board and start over. You just played from whatever position you'd created, made the best moves you could with what remained, and hoped that somewhere in the wreckage you could find something worth protecting. Nathan rode the subway home, thinking about tomorrow's class and the kids he'd meet, and the small, unglamorous work of trying to be slightly less terrible than he used to be. It wasn't much, but it was honest. And after 20 years of lies, honesty felt like winning.